Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, what is the response of Rwanda to a UN report implicating it and Uganda in a rebellion in the DR of Congo? A report by the team of United Nations experts has implicated Rwanda, Uganda and Burundi in the current war where M23 rebels are fighting the DRC government. The report says both Rwanda and Uganda support the rebels by providing training, weapons, and a safe haven for the political leadership. The UN report says elements within the Rwandan army and the UPDF have direct control over the rebel operations, giving both military tactics and intelligence. In the recent past, similar reports have emerged, concluding that neighboring countries are fueling rebellion in that same country, the Congo, because of the high interests in minerals. In fact, Rwanda is said to be a leading exporter of coltan, which is used in laptops and mobile phones, despite not having its own deposits. Rwandan and Ugandan forces have previously clashed within the DRC territory in what is commonly referred to as the Kisangani debacle, and both countries are accused of exporting instability, considering the fact that rebel organizations that are fighting respective governments are operating from the DRC. Countries in the Great Lakes region are continuing with efforts to tame the DRC rebellion, but a proposal to send in a neutral force is being opposed by the DR of Congo, especially the idea of both Uganda and Rwanda contributing personnel for such a force. The UN has indicated that it intends to indict leaders of the M23 rebel group. Rwanda and Uganda face possible sanctions. Rwanda and Uganda have continued to dismiss the accusations, and Rwanda, which is a new member of the UN Security Council, intends to use its position to water down the UN report. So tonight we begin by looking at the allegations being made against Rwanda, and also look at the proposals Rwanda is making to end the DRC conflict, considering the fact that DRC is host to hostile forces against the Kigali establishment. Our guest tonight is His Excellency Major General Frank Mugambajje, Rwandan High Commissioner to Uganda. You're most welcome, Mr. High Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Your Excellency, why is Rwanda fueling a rebellion in the DRC, if that is true?
Well, certainly Rwanda is not fueling a rebellion in DRC. Let me point out from the outset that Rwanda, given Rwanda's socio-economic and development status, Rwanda would benefit from a stable region and environment. So the issue of fearing insecurity cannot arise, even in the context of and the contemporary situation in Rwanda. On the contrary, Rwanda has been a great contributor to building peace and security in the region and even beyond. You must be aware that apart from Rwanda's achievements in terms of building peace and security in its own borders, we are big contributors to peacemaking efforts around the world. In fact, as of today, Rwanda stands number 6 biggest contributor in the world in the UN peacekeeping missions. So it's a contrary of what is being stated. But let me also make some comments on the opening remarks that you made. So in short, Rwanda does not support rebellion. Rwanda is not into the situation pertaining in DRC is an internal situation. The rebellions that emerge out of that are not even they are internal. Mostly talked about is the M23, but there are several other rebellions that go on in that country, and has to do with the management style or lack of it in that country more than anything else. I know you mentioned about Rwanda's issue of minerals, and specifically talked about coltan. Rwanda has a lot of coltan deposits and exploits its own coltan within the country. This is a fact that we put the open for everybody to come and see. We have local industries within the country. Sometimes it's even hard to imagine that people believe that Rwanda has no minerals. Rwanda has some minerals. We may not have advanced in the exploration and exploitation, but where it has been found, coltan, gold, Rwanda exploits its own minerals. In fact, when that accusation continued to surface, those who were interested came and visited even the mineral industry in Rwanda and verified for themselves. But besides, there is the mineral tagging requirement that has been done. You remember a few months back, in fact at the beginning of this year I think it was, even those who attempted to do that, a lot of minerals that had come from Congo and had to be returned. It was right in the open, and this is how we operate. Rwanda is transparent about its operations and practices, and this is what we do. So about the indictments and sanctions and all this so-called experts report is really something that is hollow and has no foundation. The allegations that are made are not supported by any evidence. They serve a different motivation. We have said this repeatedly, and Rwanda has, on its part, produced a very comprehensive response to all the allegations that have made, and they were presented even to the Security Council and the UN to clearly show that those who are producing this report have other motives other than proving a fact, because the fact is that we are not in the Congo. To make this situation clear so that people may even understand, the so-called group of experts is coordinated by a man called Stephen Hege.
Yes.
A quick profile search on Hege reveals a lot that should be informing even the same people who deployed him to do the job.
What is that?
Because he's been expressing views ever since the mid 2007, 2009. He's written and made his views very clear about his sympathies about the FDLR. The forces that are now in Congo have been in the Congo for almost the last 2 decades. The forces that are responsible for committing the genocide.
Explain to us about the FDLR, so for someone who might not know about them. These are the former government forces that you put out of power.
Yes, that committed genocide, and once they had been defeated in the country, they ran into the Congo, and they have been there. Safe haven for them for all this time. And they continue to commit atrocities to the Congolese. Their main agenda being continuing, if given a chance, continuing the genocide that they were forced to not to abandon, but they were not denied a chance to continue. These are the fundamental issues. So a man of Hege's credentials, leading a team of experts, of course, having expressed his will to propagate a campaign against the government of Rwanda really is a serious matter. It's something that anybody looking for objectivity would have to question, and this is what Rwanda has put on the table. That's not to, because what does that mean? It means it's shown very clearly, even the way the report is and whatever the allegation they have, the flaws in the methodology and procedures, the same procedures that are prescribed by the UN on how such investigations should be carried out, have been flouted, giving the right of reply to even the person that is being mentioned. How can you deny that? Whether individual,
they never spoke to the government.
Or government, no. And you can imagine that they have even ignored the responses that we have made, because precisely it completely dismisses the entire effort. So it's something we have put before the UN and all those concerned, so that this should not really have anything to to be given any level of credibility.
Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. What is the response of Rwanda to a UN report implicating it and Uganda in a rebellion in the DRC? Our guest is His Excellency Major General Frank Mugambajje, Rwandan High Commissioner to Uganda. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion at some stage. Mr. Ambassador, what kind of government would you like to see in Kinshasa?
Well, it's not my I think it's about what the Congolese people deserve. And I think the Congolese people, the people of DRC, like the people of Rwanda and the people of the region, and indeed all communities in this world deserve a government that takes care, first of all, a government that protects them, a government that takes care of their interests, a government that will put to the utilization of the resources, the endowments that the country has in their benefit. We are all faced with the challenge of we have had distortions relating to the past when the management maybe was not in our hands. There is that exogenous, the external factor of people that have had a role in distorting part of our history. Fortunately, we were given a chance to take matters in our own hands, to design our destiny. And so this is really the challenge. This is what a legitimate, effective leadership should be doing. Harnessing the resources for the benefit of the country and its people, making sure that the lives of the people are uplifted.
Right, I mean,
this is precisely what
I mean, what I'm describing is the day-to-day running of any government anyway. It could be an island in Tonga or wherever, the Samoas. But this is the DRC, neighboring the Congo, with about 1 million people who want to overthrow your government. How would you like this to be handled?
Well, you know, every government has a responsibility. Within its borders, it has also responsibility on how it relates with the environment in which they live, which is the external environment. So when you say there is a government in DRC, it should be able to protect not only its people, but also to defend its sovereignty. But defense of sovereignty means you do not use your ground, you do not allow your ground to be used by forces that are up to no good to you and to your neighbors. Otherwise, that throws the whole leadership in question. So to allow a genocidal force to stay and operate within your borders is in the first place a very serious matter, because genocide, remember, is a crime against humanity, and every nation, every person has an obligation to fight that. So to let it go on like that for a long time, that's why some time back we had a dialogue with the DRC on this matter, and the result of that dialogue was at one point to really support them in dealing with that problem. And I think we engaged in joint efforts to try and deal with the FDR problem. I know that, for example, the regional organization ICGLR at some point, and in fact continuously, has visited this issue of negative forces that are hosted or, given a safe haven in the borders of certain countries.
Tolerated.
Pardon?
Or tolerated.
Well, even before we get there, just having them there, whether tolerated or not tolerated, is a shortfall on the responsibility of any leadership. But to tolerate it is even taking it to another level. And so, in the resolutions of some of the summits of the ICG, you'll find is that all member countries, to which even DRC is, should not tolerate the existence of negative forces, because this generates all sorts of conflicts. Not to deal with that is a serious weakness.
So how do you go around it? Is it going to be the New York, Geneva, and other place? How do you go around this?
No, I think there is the solution that is being thought and worked on by the ICGLR, the International Conference of the Great Lakes, which is in fact at the very base of why the organization was put in place, to look at issues of conflict and insecurity in the region.
How are you handling? Where are you going to take 1 million people armed in a huge campus on its own in another country? How do you deal with it practically?
Well, there are measures that have been constituted. First of all, the measures that have been adopted by the summit of the heads of state of the ICGLR, and they include, among other things, given the contemporary situation, dealing with handling the suspicious situations, ending some of these allegations that come from all over the place by very responsible and accountable people. The only way to deal with it is to verify the situation on the ground.
Well, but let's look at it. You don't need to verify. You have 1 million people, former soldiers of another government. They are across the border.
Yes, I was coming. I think I was being, giving it a broader explanation so that we can all get on the same page. So that by doing that, you allay the fears or even end speculation about whether so and so is country A or country B is involved in the internal affairs of another one. But beyond that, the region under the ICGLR process, it took a commitment to say, yes, we need to deal with these negative forces, and how do we do it? We need to mobilize within ourselves a force that can be committed to do that. And so there is a collective regional approach to this problem. And I want to emphasize that this is really the only way that a solution can be found. The solution will be found from the collective effort of the neighbors of this of DRC, who not only have suffered the consequences of insecurity in that place, but who need the peace and stability for their own development processes to go on. So it's not about, and I think this process has been supported not only by the ICGLR, it has been supported by SEDAC, it has been supported by AU, the UN. It pledges to support, and this support should come so that the regional initiative, the homegrown solutions that has been phrased by a number of people, is the way forward, so that a solution can be found to the negative forces, including the FDLR, but to also look at the underlying causes of why these rebellions happen. Because sometimes if you don't treat the cause, you're likely to see a resurgence of a problem. And this is what has happened in the past.
I'd like us to talk about the M23, but before we do that, let's exhaust this, if we can, FDLR. Let's try some scenario planning here. How would you prescribe a solution to those hostile forces? How do you deal with FDLR?
FDLR, by the way, should not even be categorized as just a negative force, in my view. FDLR are genociders. They have to account. A number of their leaders have been indicted. I'm sure you're aware about that, and people should go for them and they account. So it's an issue of accountability.
To get 1 million people and take them to the ICTR in Arusha.
No, they are not 1 million.
How many are there?
They were not 1 million in first place. You remember that when the genociders moved into the Congo, they moved with a large population of people who were actually being held hostage.
Human shells,
hostage, political capital, all sorts of things. Over the years, most of those Rwandans have come back to Rwanda. They are part of the development process that is happening in Rwanda. So we're simply talking about the isolated group of a few thousands that are hardcore criminals, extreme criminals, who want to continue on the agenda of committing the genocide. So I don't know where you're getting the 1 million. The 1 million was the 1 millions who moved into the Congo. They have all come back to Rwanda. Rwanda today, by the way, is 11.6, moving to almost 12 million people.
So
most of the people have come back.
How many are they?
The what?
The FDLR. How many in your estimation?
It's difficult to have the exact figure, but it's certainly a few thousands. A few thousand.
7,000?
About 6,000, something like that. That is some of the figures as given by some people who have attempted to estimate, but I would agree.
And they are armed.
They have always been armed.
Where would you like to take them, Arusha or Geshesha in Rwanda?
That responsibility, by the way, is not only for Rwanda. Like I told you, genocide is...
It's a crime against humanity.
Yes, and the responsibility to handle these people also rests with the international community. It rests with those who are hosting them. It rests with the international community. Rwanda is part of that international effort and regional effort. It, of course, has specific interests because they are Rwandese. If they want to bring them to Rwanda, they will go through... Rwanda has handled very many of those categories, and they have gone through a process of justice. I'm sure you know about Gachacha.
Yes.
Where people have been held to accountability, but to end the culture of impunity, but also made considerations about the reconciliatory process.
They are forgiven technically.
So it's a restorative justice.
Restorative justice.
Forgiven, partial,
community service, partly, depending on whatever role you played in this thing. And remember, the communities which knew and understood and suffered this were part and parcel of that restorative justice process. It just ended this year. Your Excellency, would it make sense? Because
even those hardcore criminals are still Rwandans. And if they are brought to Rwanda, will handle them through a process that they'll go through the justice system.
The same system that other people have gone
But if they choose to also deal with them elsewhere,
you find
what is important,
you follow them there and leave them there.
What is important is about accounting.
Well, some people have said you decided, since the international community is not doing anything, you follow them there and leave them there, deal with them.
Whoever says that does not understand our policy, domestic and foreign.
Well, but you solve your problems. The DRC is too big for Kinshasa to govern, so you go in there and sort out the problem.
That is not. That's not the issue. These genociders are all over the place. Some of them live in other countries other than live in the DRC. So the issue is not about going there. The issue is about raising the matter to those who are supposed to be handling.
But they're not handling. They're not sorting it out.
Precisely, and we're not getting.
So
we're not getting tired. We're not getting tired. We have got people indicted in Europe, got people indicted in the US. We've got people indicted in different places. DRC. Why these people are not getting indicted, or even those who are indicted are not being found, is because of the confusion and the vacuum that exists in the place. This is what happens when there is absence of law and order, when there is absence of effective governance. But that doesn't mean we are going to substitute the government in Kinshasa. It's not our intention. I think we have a duty and responsibility to work for the development of our country, which is something that we are working on very hard and progressing very well.
But what has been, Rwandan forces have been in the DRC before?
Yes, as part of a regional effort. I think it was a regional effort. It was understanding based on sorting out a problem from a regional perspective, which we are still committed to do if it comes from that perspective.
Well,
we do not have a unilateral agenda. And this is the point I've been trying to emphasize.
This is Spectrum, listeners on Radio 1. Tonight, what is the response of Rwanda to a UN report implicating it and Uganda in a rebellion in the DRC? We're going for a break. We'll be back. Do stay tuned.
There are many things that make us truly Ugandan. We love to bang kabozi, jazz, and vibe. So, to celebrate our Ugandanness, we're offering you double kabozi minutes, orange to orange, for the same price on Free Talk. Enjoy 20 minutes at only 500 shillings per day and 120 minutes at only 1,000 shillings per day. Simply dial *134# to subscribe. Celebration changes with Orange. Today changes with Orange.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back to Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight on Spectrum, what is the response of Rwanda to a UN report implicating it and Uganda in a rebellion in the DR of Congo? Our guest tonight, His Excellency Major General Frank Mugambajje, Rwandan High Commissioner to Uganda. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion or send text messages to 7197. That is Spectrum, message, question or comment. Send it to 7197. Mr. Ambassador, what are Rwanda's proposals towards ending the conflict in the DR Congo?
We support the regional effort. We fully support the ICGLR initiative. We participate in it fully, and like I mentioned earlier, that is what we think is the way to go towards finding a sustainable solution for the crisis in DRC.
And how far have you gone with this? They've described a neutral force, and they say Rwanda should not be part of it. Do you feel snubbed when they say that?
Well, it's not a prescription of one or the other. I think when the decisions are reached in the summits of heads of state, it's a collective responsibility. And as far as I know, that idea of an international neutral force was endorsed by the heads of state at their meeting. Other mechanisms that were in place, including the intelligence fusion cell, to gather intelligence and be sure about the negative forces we're talking about, the numbers, where they are, the extent of the problem, the joint verification mechanisms to which every member country, the 11 countries contribute to, are all efforts that have been agreed on in a forum of the summit of the heads of state. So that's what I understand. That's what Rwanda also goes by. To have individual deviations or insinuations is not really where we should be focusing. We should be focusing on cooperative effort, which is what the region has decided to do. Maybe it's even coming at a point when this is really the way to go, to look at the cooperative effort, because finally, when security emerges in one of the states of our region, it impacts very negatively on all of us. You know what has been the problem in the Horn of Africa, Somalia.
Right. It's impacted the entire world.
It impacts the entire region.
$7 billion lost.
So that terrorism, hovers all over the place. We don't want that to happen. We don't want insecurity. I think the region and Africa at large is at a stage where we need to emancipate and build these cooperative efforts towards the real salvaging of people from the predicament that they have been suffering for a long time, the one of poverty. Can we grow? Can we really use our resources to ensure that we have a fair share of the benefits of these resources within our countries?
Well, that's a long-term goal, agreed, in a normal state. But let's look at...
Well, the journey of a million miles begins
that's what the Chinese say.
And that's what we must do.
Are you happy? Is Rwanda happy with these efforts, these ISGLR efforts to end the rebellion there?
Well, Rwanda, of course, is very concerned. It's very concerned. Like,
do you think all
the other countries are concerned about the pertaining situation in the DRC, and that's why this effort. If you recall, the heads of state have had meetings here in Kampala.
Yes.
Subsequent meetings for almost about 4 meetings in a very short space of time. That is the urgency and the attention they are giving to the problem. So we are happy that all the countries, all the heads of state are focused on the matter, and we believe that the way it's taking on, the chairman of ICGR, I think, is giving it a lot of time, enough time to deal with it, and giving it attention, supported by his peers, the other heads of state of the ICGR, and really, the problems of Congo did not come about in a short time. They've been long-standing, and so we may not even start imagining that they will end so abruptly. But I think what is important, it's put in place a process that is sure to deal with the problem on a long-lasting
Well, I mean, you're being philosophical about it, and I would agree in a normal situation.
It all begins with philosophy. It all begins with
understanding.
It all begins with understanding.
The RPF took power in Rwanda after being in exile in Uganda for many years.
Yes.
You could have a situation that festers and unattended.
Do you know why it took so long?
Well, there's intransigence in Kigali. Habyarimana used to say, Rwanda is like a bottle full of water.
Sure.
You're not saying the same thing.
Sure. And those forces, the Banyarwanda forces that coalesced to get him out of place, to change the regime, took time to coalesce them, both inside and outside the country. It reached a point where the people in the country began to see the propaganda and the negative approaches And the damage that it was doing to the country took them time to realize that. So it's not anybody's. It's not a wishful thinking. It's about actually getting the thing. People have to understand these problems first.
Ambassador Mugambajje, do you think this effort will end the M23 rebellion, or do you think M23 today, another group tomorrow? They already changed their name, I think.
Well, that has been the phenomenon. M23 is not the first one. There were others before it, and like I said, even now there are many. Some people say there are about 40 or so other groups. Some of them are Laia, Mukombo, whatever. There are very many names and very many. What that signifies is the fact that there is something that is fundamentally wrong. Let me take you back a little bit, because we have to have a history about some of these problems. You remember that the inter-Congolese dialogue that took place even before the president and the regime before it came in place, the transition that took place in the Congo, reached two resounding conclusions. By the way, many people invested a lot of time. The region, international community, former leaders, respectable leaders of this place, and they reached two astounding conclusions. One is that there was a governance problem in the DRC and had to be dealt with.
Well, there's a consensus on that.
Second, that there were very many disgruntled, as a result of that, so many disgruntled groups, hence rebellions, rebels, and all these other things. And the consensus was deal with the two. Well, the political process and also the integration of these people, marginalized groups, and so on and so forth. What some of the allegations that are put behind the recurrence and continued rebellions is about the failure to handle and manage that reintegration process. Well, but it's not something new. It's not a new phenomenon.
If there are guns that are directed towards Kinshasa, but there are guns that are directed to another country.
Which one?
Well, the M23. Well, you have the FDLR. The rationale is Rwanda is interested.
Let's separate these two things.
Let's get because we're trying to get the genesis of them.
Can we separate these two things?
Yes.
And we should never, ever, not even a small insinuation to level these two groups, because FDLR is a genocidal group.
Granted,
stated objective very clear, past record very clear,
no problem.
And so that is one category. It's there. That one, let's not mix it.
Granted, yes.
Now, when we talk about rebellions and other things, let's talk about them separately. Let's talk about them. The line is very clear.
Let's talk about them.
And the line should be clear for everybody.
Yes.
Never ever try to mix these two.
Because it doesn't work that. Let's get the answer here, Mr. Ambassador. You support, some people say you support the M20. They say they found equipment which is labeled, which it looks like it originated from Kigali. They say your Minister for Defense, James Kabarebe, is basically commanding the M23 because you have a genuine interest in ending this FDLR.
That's where we started. That's where we started. Any credible report would have evidence from.
Well, they say they found equipment.
Can I tell you that in fact, if you have you looked at the report? No, I've looked at some experts of it. It's one thing to make an allegation, a very serious one.
Yes.
It's another to provide the evidence for it. Now that total lack of evidence, the total flow of procedure in terms of dealing or investigating these cases is at the heart of the question of this report and the motives it has. And like I said, it's very easy to see where it's emanating from, because there are people who have political agenda and they want to serve certain narratives that they have thought about before. So there is no such evidence as to point at what they are alleging. You're talking about arms, what? There is no evidence about that.
Not even one Katusha.
There isn't any. These people themselves, I was listening to an interview by one of their leader, because it was in the papers today, and they say, yes, we made big catchment of weapons of all sorts from the FLDC. This is the Congo government forces. This is their own admission. And we all know that we have been reading even the papers before about how some of these forces abandon a lot of equipment. And these are at the disposal of whoever wants to pick them. So what is so surprising that some of these people may have these things with a pertaining situation like that?
So suppose
they do have a whole division, or is it a whole division of these people running to Uganda and leaving the equipment behind? Where did those equipments go? Maybe one would have to ask. So let's not really So all those allegations, wanting to hype and make it look like, oh, we have all there is absolutely no evidence. There's absolutely no evidence, credible evidence in the report that have been provided. Like I said, we have systematically given a response to most of those allegations, those that came before and those that are coming in now. We'll explain when we do get.
Suppose the M23 is defeated together with the other rebellion. This ICGLR body ends that problem. What happens to the FDLR?
About what?
Suppose the M23 problem goes away. What happens to these genocides? The 6,000 Rwanda.
How do you relate this to? I want to see the.
Well, there's still a problem.
I want to understand the connection you are making about these two. I have belabored.
Well, the ICGLR can resolve M23, but they also need to resolve this genocide problem. How do you suppose one problem goes away?
Sure, I agree. The ICGLR should address all these issues, but in the context in which both fall. They should not be mixed. But it's not only the ICGLR.
Well,
the international community that should deal with that. You remember that currently in DRC, for the last so many years, 10 or so, there has been a force deployed, international force, 20,000 plus with a lot of resources. One of the issues was to deal with this problem of FDLR. Why they have not done? I think Rwanda has done what it needs to do. Rwanda has raised the alert, because by the way, that FDLR, these genocidal forces, are not only a threat to Rwanda.
Yes.
They have been committing atrocities even in DRC. At one time they were even in countries beyond the bounds of DRC. So they are a scourge that must be dealt with, not by only Rwanda.
Do they have a political leadership, to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they do. The person who used to be the spokesperson and the acclaimed leader of the FDLR was Barashima, and I lived in Germany. I think Germany eventually found, we were telling them all the time and giving them all the evidence. They found the evidence, credible evidence, and got hold of him together with his deputy. The commander of that FDLR group is also indicted, and so on and so forth. So they have some leadership.
And there's no choice of a political solution. You won't send envoys to talk to them in their bushes.
That is a very outrageous thing to even demand.
Uganda spoke to the airline.
Why do you talk to a genocider? A genocider is somebody who has decided and said, my agenda is about exterminating the people. If you want to say that those who are talking about, because this is not the first genocide that is happening in
there's one in the 50s.
So if you want to ask the people of Europe where genocide happened, the people of Israel where genocide happened, to go and talk to have talked to the Nazis, I think we'll be asking for too much.
This is Spectrum
it's really outrageous to even imagine that type of thing.
You can call in now on number 0414-348-111, 031-226-0390, 031-226-1390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. You are on the UN Security Council, Mr. Ambassador. What do you intend to do with those 2 years?
Well, first of all, our being elected to the position of a non-permanent member of the Security Council is a clear demonstration of the confidence that the world body and the members of that world body have in what has transpired in Rwanda post-genocide period. And like I mentioned earlier, the basis of this is on the assessment of what contribution we have made towards building international peace. Rwanda is now ranked number 6 in contributing to peacekeeping, peace-building efforts. We are in Darfur, we are in Sudan, we are in Southern Sudan, we are in Haiti, we are in Sierra Leone, we are in Chad, trying to make a contribution because again, this is informed by our experience on what we have gone through. So it's a determination. It's a very deliberate and conscious effort that since we were victims of being abandoned, we shouldn't be.
You shouldn't abandon others in need.
We shouldn't abandon others, and we should be available when we can, and we're happy to be making that contribution. So it's not something new. Rwanda has been contributing to international peace efforts. Rwanda is going to contribute even more when it has the opportunity to sit on the Security Council.
Spectrum, hello.
Hello, my name is Ben Sapena.
Yes.
And I'm calling from Ginger. I was listening to the Spectrum show and I had a contribution I wanted to make.
Yes, please go on, Billy.
Concerning what His Excellency was talking about, I totally agree with the approach of the Rwandan government. I don't understand why when the Rwandan government, whether they are involved in Congo or not, why when they're there, why it's such a big deal. Yet we have countries like the America itself, when they have terrorists in another country who cause a national emergency or of any problem to their country, they go after them. They attack different countries, and nobody has a problem with that. No one, they're not, the UN does not complain, does not come up with a report. So I don't understand why, when a country like Rwanda, which is trying to protect its people, whether it's involved in Congo or not, decides to go there. I don't understand why that ends up being a concern. So for me, what I'm saying is that I think a country has the right to protect its people, and if it asks the cooperation of another country, and the country is not willing to help, then I think it is okay for another country to take it in its own hands, the matter in its own hands. If it's going to affect their own people, instead of having another genocide in Rwanda, I would rather have Rwanda go to Congo and eliminate these people. So I think that I think that Congo has not been responsible enough as a government to govern their own country, but not only that, they have not been responsible to assist other countries. There are other countries which can be partners in development.
All right. Spectrum alert?
Yes. Good evening, Spectrum.
Good evening, your name?
Godfrey. I'm calling from Soroji.
Yes, Godfrey.
Now, I want to say that the conflict in Eastern Congo is as a result of Congo deliberately refusing to insecure that part of the country, has neglected Eastern Congo. So, these countries, Rwanda and Uganda, I'm not saying I'm in support, but what should they do? Look at all these people in the eastern part of Congo. They are all neglected. What should these countries do? Northeast is NRA. The other side down there is Interahamwe. What do you think anybody can do if you are the Uganda or Rwandese? Then the other thing is, these people should negotiate with the rebels, them to the three rebels. Because these are guys who are just been pushed into Uganda and in Rwanda. They have nowhere to be. So it's good if Congo and the authorities in Congo would negotiate with these guys, and then they settle the problem in Eastern Congo. So thank you.
All right. Spectrum alert?
Edmond.
Yes, sir. Your name?
You're a pastor. Good evening, and thanks for ambassador in the studio.
Good evening, Jimmy.
I just wanted to know his effort towards reconciling the communities in Rwanda. Because, Rwanda is a little bit smaller. So divide and rule is not very easily possible. Reason being, you have Victoria Ingabire incarcerated with the court orders to make her be there. Genuine or not, we don't know, because she's being said to be the person behind funding genocide as ambassador has explained. But let's face it, how do we continue as Africans who want to have our own solutions when in our own home countries we have those kind of questions coming up? Uganda is lucky because there are so many of them. Crimes created over 50. The ruler can say anything, and a lucky guy from one minority tribe will be given an ambassadorship or ministry or position, and they keep quiet. Rwanda has 3. Twa, Tutsi, Hutu. Now go by the numbers. Account for the last 17 years, you want to say? Kagame has been there. How do you reconcile to ensure there is no further genocide beyond your own lifetime? Good evening.
All right, let's get back to the studio. Ambassador Mugambajje.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the views expressed by the callers. And let me start from somebody from Jinja called Bena or Sabena.
Benson Bella, complex name.
The point he's making is about double standards. And well, this is a feature that we all...
Maybe you should pick a lip. There is a way they killed Osama bin Laden. Maybe you should see that tape and do the same thing if you can.
This is not the way we've chosen to go. Because even if... You see, we have to understand that the dynamics that operate in this world are also informed by different scenarios and different situations. The USA is a superpower. Sometimes it operates beyond... accountability from any of us. I don't imagine that Rwanda would, for example, want to, maybe now that we're in the Security Council, but this is a matter that really calls for, and Rwanda has consistently pointed out this issue of double standards. That's why, for example, we are not part of ICC, because it looks like it's a framework, a legal framework aimed at targeting the poor and developed countries. It's not focusing everybody. Justice is supposed to be for all. It doesn't go there. So Rwanda has said very clearly, we are not joining this unless there's some fair play. Justice is about addressing the same issues the same way for everybody. It doesn't seem to be the case. So why should we be there? And Rwanda has also been very vocal where double standards have been applied. But that's all. We have a voice, and we need to do that. But internally, we have to run away from this type of double standards. So when we talk about, and this is the point that Geoffrey is raising, the crisis in DRC neglected the issue of identity, nationality, denying certain people rights and so on and so forth. These are some of the critical issues that indeed we're talking about, and he's right. Any responsible government claiming sovereignty and claiming rights to represent the people should address these issues. Otherwise, they don't amount to what a leadership should be. And this is really the vacuum and the hollowness and the crisis and the problems, the source of the problems that are created in the region. And that's why the regional approach is talking about looking at the root causes. Can we examine why all this is happening? Why are not all these rebel forces running into Tanzania or some other place? It's because there is order. There is an effective government. Why do you create a haven? And so we must get the root causes of some of these problems. And indeed, like somebody also called in and talked, there is need to talk. Yes, there is a need to examine the root causes. And I think the ICGR was spot on this. Was saying, yes, a military solution, but a military solution should also come to address issues where negotiations and talking and dialogue, because dialogue is the starting point for finding lasting solution.
Yes.
So that is how, for example, the summit mandated the chairman of ICGR to engage the parties concerned. That's the DRC and the labor force.
All right, the last caller.
Can I also finish with the efforts towards reconciliation? I think Rwanda has done a great job and made a lot of progress in terms of, first of all, and this is possibly the biggest credit that goes to the leadership in Rwanda and the person of His Excellency the head of state, President Paul Kagame.
Yes.
Bringing back Rwandans to identify themselves as nationals of a country called Rwanda before anything else. You could be
with pride,
and building actually the self-worth and the dignity that goes with it. This is us. We've gone through hell. Nobody came to get out of this mess. We've managed to get ourselves, because at some point the prescription by some of those who claim to be very knowledgeable in matters of state and whatever, they thought Rwanda was never going to be, it was washed off the face of the earth. We have reconstituted the country under the leadership of President Kagame. We have galvanized the people around a common destiny, a common cause, had a vision 2020, and we are moving steadfastly towards
Vision 2020.
Yes, and it's working extremely well. That's why people are recognizing it all over the place. By the way, some of the achievements that have been in that country are near miraculously. You could because people are now together thinking very seriously about how to uplift themselves. They are being empowered. Rwandans appreciate the fact that in all sectors, social sector, education, health, access to health, access to education, space and security,
yes.
economic empowerment.
Yes.
All these are things that are, by every measure of any index, that have really moved very well. And everybody is in that country. The international financial institutions. Right. The other day we are rewarding our Minister of Finance and Economic Planning as being one of the best south of the Sahara for advancing economic. Of course, he's implementing.
Mr.
Rwanda, yes, is advancing.
And the one before him, one of the ones before him is now in Tunis, Donald Kaberuka.
Well, Donald Kaberuka, between him and them, was the Minister of Government.
So he was the architect of the Vision 2020, I think, even though he doesn't want to admit.
Well, he was the Minister of Economic Planning and Finance, but I think the architect of the vision is really His Excellency, the President of the country.
We have to go. Thank you very much.
There was the issue of Victoria Ngabire, which I can't go with.
Victoria Ngabire, you cut off
because you see,
she's
one of the distinguishing factors of the governance infrastructure and approach in Rwanda is emphasizing accountability.
So cut off that woman's hair.
Pardon?
Cut off her hair and put her in jail, 1930 jail.
Well, the issue of accountability is that you don't apply double standards.
We have to go.
What applies to one applies to the other. So if you are, and the evidence against her, by the way, most of it came from where she lived in Europe. Those who sent her, in fact, followed, because when we challenged them, they actually produced the evidence. The evidence about support to FDR and so on and so forth. She's in court.
Guilty as
and I think she's in court.
Yes.
And it's only fair to allow
the wheels of justice
to allow justice to operate. That's the only way you can build a sense of society.
Thank you very much, Major General Frank Mugambajje, Rwandan High Commissioner to Uganda. Thank you for coming to Spectrum tonight, sir.
You are welcome.
Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. So Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is a news in English.